Shadow Generations has only been out for a couple months by the time of this video's release. That being said, speedrunners have already come up with flashy tricks, intelligent routes, and an incredibly optimized world record. Today, we're going to be looking at Alpha Dolphin's world record speedrun of Shadow Generations any percent. While on the surface a lot of the run looks very simple, we're going to take a deep dive into the mechanics and routing decisions speedrunners make to go as fast as possible. If you're unfamiliar, the goal of an any percent speedrun is to beat the game from a fresh file by any means possible. So to start off, Alpha selects the new game option and quickly finds himself in Space Colony Ark Act 1. Right away, you're going to see some really powerful tech here with the Chaos Sphere, but since this stage is loaded with strats as it is, I'll explain this later on. After using this sphere tech to cross a few gaps, we come across our first trick utilizing these green platforms and their skewed gravity. While there was a massive skip with this tech that is now obsolete, Alpha goes for a variant of this exploit to help us get to the next trick. This involves the use of the game's auto-running mechanics that you see in nearly every 3D stage. When you enter this tube, you are granted this special auto-running state where Shadow runs straight forward automatically, and gets some extra air on jumps. These physics are locked down really strictly to these areas, and whenever you exit, they force you to return to normal. Well, speedrunners actually found a way to gain these physics without entering the tube at all. Thanks to 5avoa, we can see that this trigger to gain the auto-run physics actually extends to the outer part of the tube ever so slightly. This means that in theory, you could gain the physics without hitting the trigger to ever lose them. Immediately you can see the impact of these physics in the run, as Shadow just glides over all obstacles. But this does present an issue. These stages were not built for Shadow to use these physics, so speedrunners need to navigate the stage very carefully to progress. By gently navigating and using these item capsules as a way to center Shadow, Alpha sets up for a massive boost. This boost allows us to avoid the trigger for this missile section, which usually locks you in. From here, you can use these physics to just make it over to a wall past the missile, and prepare for yet another massive boost. From here, Alpha boosts into the air and avoids all of the platforming normally needed to progress, and aims for a very specific spot. This part is really important here because Alpha needs to hit the checkpoint and then take an intentional death to restore Shadow to normal physics. If you don't take this death, you will actually softlock, since Shadow will only run up this back wall from here. After all of that, Alpha has already skipped almost all of this first stage. This trick saves around 30 seconds depending on how fast you get the physics, but it can be a big reset point for runners. After a little bit more platforming, Shadow has a date with Black Doom and his favorite Sonic stage of all time. Black Doom transforms the surrounding area into a radical highway, and in the speedrun, this part is actually very tame. Because of all these long boosting sections, there actually isn't much more to do than just boost through it all. That is until you get to this slide section. These areas are usually a bit slower than normal movement. You can hold back on the stick or let go of it completely and jump to speed up Shadow, but past that there isn't too much more to it. Or is there? Well, speedrunner Sharu found that if you jump right as you land, you can get in the air before Shadow enters this slide state. And from here, you can immediately boost and start using the Chaos Sphere tech, which I should explain now. This tech is known as Spear Glides, or as I affectionately call it, Spear Maxing. In Shadow Generations, your speed drops off quickly in the air, especially after a boost. This is a big problem, as there are tons of areas where it would be really fast if you could somehow just lock the speed down, and that's where Spear Maxing comes in. For some reason, using the Chaos Sphere in midair will lock Shadow's speed at the moment he uses the ability until the animation ends. So, if you can use a Chaos Sphere at Shadow's peak midair speed, which is right after a boost, you can keep this top speed until you hit the ground again. This one tech genuinely changes the entire game, and there are many examples in just about every stage. Also, I do need to point out before we get too far into it, a runner named Xanz actually got a new world record right before I finished making this video, clocking in at a 102.40. While I'm not going to go and re-edit the entire video, I'll point out any new strats Xanz implemented along the way. Back to Ark Act 1, we can use this tech since we avoid entering the slide state, and if you're really good, you can do this multiple times, by jumping again right after Shadow hits the ground. This is a sort of niche interaction, but you don't actually lose the speed right away, and you can in theory chain it together over and over to skip the entire thing if you jump quick enough. After completing this slide section, there isn't much to do but destroy Black Doom's alternate reality and finish the stage. Real quick, a whopping 99% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so if you would consider subscribing, I would really appreciate it as it helps me a lot more than you know. Thanks, and let's get back to it. After finishing Act 1, we get some lore to skip and a brief look at the hub world, but Alpha immediately heads back into Arc Act 2, as we have to complete the stage to proceed. The Act 2s in Shadow generations are almost always fully 2D stages similar to the original generations. A really big thing that we'll see in both 2D and 3D stages are these Chaos Control trails. If you activate Chaos Control and then go into one of these, you will fly all the way to the end of the path. And this is almost always the fastest way to go through any section that has them. Because of how fast these are, we'll see Alpha go out of his way to build up Chaos Control meter by destroying 5 enemies, or getting a Chaos Control capsule like this one here. This stage also sees the return of the dreaded gravity tubes from Sonic Adventure 2. These things are nearly as bad in this game as the original version, so Alpha tries to avoid them wherever possible. After some precise platforming and getting to the halfway point of the stage, Shadow goes through a transformation and gains the most broken ability in the game. For some reason though, we only get the Doom Wings for this one stage, and then they will go away again until the end of the story. But while it's here, we are absolutely going to abuse it. After flying over most of the stage, Alpha sets up to put 2 broken mechanics together, the wings and the gravity tubes. By dropping onto the gravity tubes and then immediately when you land, boost and jump up. You can make it all the way to the roof above, which alone wouldn't be enough for anything, but using the Doom Wings, you can actually make it all the way to the edge, use a double jump, and skip almost all of this ending section. Or you could do this crazy method that Xanz does in the 102, where you use the wings to repeatedly boost over and over, gaining slightly more height each time. Immediately after completing the stage, Shadow unlocks his first permanent Doom power. This allows him to use the Doom Spear on multiple targets at once, which Alpha immediately uses to get through some skill check gates. Normally this next check makes you break these boxes and then lock onto every target, but Alpha uses the spring to fly into the air and get all of the targets without having to bother with the boxes. Another thing you'll notice is Alpha's moving around the hub with this weird slide trick. This slide is actually a bit faster than boosting normally in the hub, and if you boost while you slide, you can actually still control Shadow's movements. Alpha will be using this whenever possible to gain a little bit of time save across the whole run. Entering the next zone, fans of Sonic Heroes will be familiar with Rail Canyon. This stage lives up to its name with a ton of basically automated rail sections. Using spear maxing whenever possible is going to be integral to going fast in this stage, as there are some massive gaps that can skip some of these rail sections. After some more platforming and minor route changes, we see yet another trick that will be recurring in this run, known as Capsule Glitch. This glitch allows for 2 uses of Shadow's Chaos Control ability for the price of 1 capsule. If you hold the button for Shadow's Chaos Control as you hit the capsule, it'll immediately trigger the ability, without actually collecting its contents. When the Chaos Control ends, the particles from the capsule will actually catch up to you, granting you another use. This is impactful for a few reasons. First of which is that using Chaos Control grants a full boost meter, which is very helpful for this spot in particular, since boost management is so important in this game. Other considerations are obstacles that can be in the way, like stopping these trains later and also just having extra uses for things like the Chaos Control trails. To get to that section though, Alpha used a side route that amused me a lot when I first saw it. Instead of going all the way around this section the normal way, there's a hidden spring in these barrels that lets you skip all of it. It's actually unreal how many little moments there are in this game that save ridiculous amounts of time. This takes us to the section with the Chaos Control path, and we return to Black Doom's favorite area. Give it up again for Radical Highway. This time, the Radical Highway section is at least a little bit more interesting, while there is a good amount of automated sections in freefall states. This time around, we have ways to make these faster. The first is utilizing spear maxing to completely avoid this freefall section altogether. Normally, this area is not touched by the player at all, but it is still solid, for the most part. During the freefall, there are moments where the floor gets ripped off and flung at Shadow, and these parts actually don't have collision at all if you stand on them. After some platforming, we get to the final freefall section of this area. This one you have to hit Black Doom to escape and slowly fall to the end, but if you jump immediately after the hit, you can move to the side and stomp, making this process way faster. If you land in the right part, Shadow will actually get a massive boost of speed as well. From here, Shadow returns to Rail Canyon. Most of the end section here is just riding the rails, but there are 2 big strats here. The first is a massive slope jump off of the rail, and if done well, you can just barely make it to this upper rail you normally have to go around to reach. One thing I didn't mention earlier about spear maxing is that some objects like dash rings or rails can actually give you more speed than Shadow's boost. so you can actually rail switch off of this section at the end and maintain this faster speed by spear maxing carefully to the final section of the stage. Coming up next is Rail Canyon Act 2, and this stage also lives up to the name, with over half of the stage being on rails. The start of this stage has two really big chaos control trails, and routing meter quickly is imperative. These enemy routes are one of the single biggest time saves in this stage, because of just how much ground both of these trails cover in the matter of seconds. After that, it's all rails from here, and that's where a really important strat comes in. You see, the rails in 2D are really slow in this game, but there's actually a weird way to speed them up. I have no explanation for why this works the way it does, but the best way to go fast isn't to hold forward. It's actually to not touch the left stick at all. For whatever reason, leaving the stick in neutral lets Shadow go way faster during these parts. So long as you jump around to avoid obstacles, you don't need to touch the stick at all during these sections. While it's obviously difficult to control Shadow this way, it saves so much time it's worth getting used to. After this though is one of the biggest skips in the entire game, and it all has to do with how the game tries to lock the player into automated sections. We'll see this breaking things throughout the run, but this is one of the only times we can utilize this in a 2D section. By boosting and sliding off of this ledge, Alpha is actually extending Shadow's coyote time, which essentially means that he can jump in midair and the game treats it like he's still on the ground. All of this is done so that he maintains Shadow's double jump. At this point, Shadow is supposed to be locked into the automation and grinding through these tunnels. But by stalling as long as possible, he's farther than intended and now nearly out of bounds. If you go far enough and then start a spear max, you can really see the effect of these physics because Shadow gets a huge burst of speed, and can even get a bit of height, but that's only to get even farther into this section. After a little bit more gliding, you can do one more jump, and after a short delay, use Chaos Sphere, and Shadow will be sent flying. This fling is incredibly hard to control, and can easily just kill you, but if you control it just right, you will be sent straight to the end of the stage. Alpha nails this trick in his any percent run, landing just before the goal ring. After completing the main stages of this area, Alpha collects Shadow's next Doom ability, the Doom Blast. This allows Shadow to kick an enemy far away and then teleport to them. Alpha does the Doom Blast tutorial and then heads to the boss gate to progress the story. This unlocks the challenges we need to complete to get keys to open this boss gate. While there are 4 keys available to us right now, we only need 3 of them. So we'll save the last key for later in the run where it's faster to get anyway. Alpha immediately warps through the hub back to Space Colony Ark and homing attacks this enemy to skip the platforming here. The first challenge involves using Chaos Control to prevent platforms from falling, and any threats coming Shadow's way. This challenge is pretty simple, but I have special hate in my heart for these missiles because the collision of them is awful. Like, for some reason you just can't jump when you're running on them, and it makes it so impossible to get past this section. The next challenge we'll be doing involves destroying a certain amount of enemies and then getting to the end. This stage isn't too crazy on tech, but there are some really cool moments, like angling this Doom Blast slightly up to skip a spring or chaining Doom Blasts together. After a few more Doom Blasts, this challenge is complete. At this point, Alpha grabs the key and teleports back to Rail Canyon. He hits this floating spring to skip the platforming up and begins the Dash Ring challenge. This challenge is a bit of a joke for its requirements, so it's basically just to sprint to the end, using these rings to skip the spring there, jumping up to the top path wherever possible. At the end, if you skip these rings, it avoids the automated section and makes Shadow way faster until the end. The next challenge here is another Chaos Control based challenge to stop moving platforms and other hazards. Immediately, there's a big strat where you can do a series of neutral jumps and gain so much speed that you can make it on top of this roof out of bounds. This allows you to skip almost all of the challenge from just one trick. These next 2 challenges are where things get tricky. The first involves destroying a set amount of targets with Doom Spear. Taking the normal route, this is no issue, but the normal route is slow. What Alpha does is spear max over to a later part of the stage, backtrack to get more targets, then progress to the end. This movement is way harder than it looks, especially with the camera acting the way it does, but Alpha pulls it off cleanly. The final challenge of this section comes in the form of a ring collector mission. Get 100 rings and finish the stage. This route is pretty cool, following that of the main stage where you hit the hidden spring and spear max across big gaps. After this challenge, we collect our final key and rush to the boss gate. The first boss of the game is Biolizard. This boss is one of the hardest in the entire series in SA2, but because it's the first boss in this game, it's a piece of cake. basically just an auto-scroller for the majority of the fight. One cool thing you can do is chaos control when it slams its wings down onto the ground, and not only does this allow you to hit the wings earlier, but it does damage quicker, skipping the bubble space completely. After some cool cinematics and QTEs, Biolizard is done, and the first main section of the run is finished. Immediately following Biolizard, Shadow gets a really big upgrade in the Doom Surf. Since we all know hedgehogs can't swim, they needed to give Shadow this ability to traverse across bodies of water. And this thing can go really fast. There is some speed tech with this, but that will come up in our next stage of the run, Kingdom Valley. Early on casually and as a speedrun, this stage was identified as one of the best in the entire game. After spearmaxing was discovered, this was one of the stages that speedrunners turned to immediately because of just how many wide open spaces there are. Right away, we use spearmaxing to skip an automated rail over a tremendous gap. After some tight platforming back up, Alpha is going to angle Shadow to hit enough enemies here to get a full chaos control meter. Alpha does a precise jump to get to this upper platform and then spearmaxes across to escape the early section of this level. If you watch a casual playthrough of this section, it is a lot of platforming and ridiculously long, but Alpha gets through this in mere moments. After using that chaos control we got earlier for some extra boost, we come up on the first water section of the stage. The first thing you'll notice is that you can hit the boost button as you hit the water to get a massive boost of speed. This will be utilized quite a bit across the stage, even intentionally losing Doom Surf to get a boost again at times. You can also jump and do the spin move to preserve Shadow's speed from the boost as well, similar to spearmaxing. After the water section, Alpha uses this weird pillar collision to start a spearmax with weird gravity, shooting Shadow directly up and skipping all the platforming to get on top of this tower. Then using this Doom Blast to get on top of the next tower, and skipping the combat room you're supposed to go to here. Coming up is some of the biggest launches in the entire game, and it's where spearmaxing really shines. You can use this to fly all the way to the big tower way off in the distance, and from there progress through somewhat normally. Not long after, the next big launch comes up. Originally, runners were just skipping the eagle and landing on the path, but you can actually boost to the side and land on this tower. This is a lot more difficult, but it does save a good amount of time. From here, Alpha blazes through the next water section and hits the ramp to enter the final section of the stage. While this section is mostly just boosting here, there is some cool routing, like taking the air rail and then dismounting, to go up top and bouncing on the rope to find these very speedy rings speedrunners didn't find for weeks. From here it's a boost to win through some nice ambiance and a solid final time. Next up is Kingdom Valley Act 2, and this one is a lot more simple. Most of the time save that has come from this stage has been an innovation in routing out the stage and less to do with the tech involved. Right away we see a good example of that, where there is just a floating rainbow ring in the air. I don't even know how Shadow is supposed to get here normally, but we can through spearmaxing. There's a lot of little stuff in this stage, like not using boost into this ring so you can boost out of it, or stomping on this spring to save a cycle. Another moment like this is where you have to very carefully time these platforms to make the right cycle or get crushed on accident. The biggest change in routing is right before the end, where you can jump over this dash pad to a red ring, and then jump over a spring to hit another floating in the air. For whatever reason, they put the spring that sends Shadow flying into the air, skipping an entire section of the stage. From here it's some platforming and bouncing on ropes to victory. At this point, Kingdom Valley is finished, and just for a moment, we get to see a flash of true greatness. Big the Cat. I still don't really understand why we didn't get Frog Forest for heroes and put Big there, but honestly I'm just happy we get to see Best Boy here. Back to the run, Alpha has no time to visit our boy and zooms across the hub to our next stage, Sunset Heights. Shadow Generations proved that Sonic Forces stages can be really cool if they were actually given time to cook. That being said, they open the stage the same way most Forces stages do. Nothing but boosting for nearly 15 seconds. They immediately remind us we're actually playing a good game though, through cool mechanics and interesting side routes. The new mechanic in this stage are these water spouts. These will send you to the top if you hit them, or if you chaos control you can go right through them. Normally for this upcoming side path you're supposed to use chaos control to stop the rubble and use homing attack to get up, but since we have slope physics, jumping off this pile works too. Next we go to a brand new underground section. Here you can use chaos control the Doom Blast and reach yet another fast side path. There is one last room that's scary here, and Alpha has two different options to handle it. You can either spearmax to this box, which is scary because it's easy to miss when you're going so fast, or you can chaos control and go right across so these enemies don't body you. Alpha chooses the latter and uses chaos control to cross this gap safely. Wait a minute, I'm starting to feel some deja vu. Let's give it up once again for Radical Highway, baby! This iteration of Radical Highway has a ton of automated moments, and these come in the form of rails and autorunners. One cool section is taking this spring hidden in the box to the top path, and then not using the Doom Blast or continuing the top path, but immediately bailing because it's actually really slow from there. After this rail section, you would think to just go to the platform here, but if you fall under it, you can just spear max to the rail and save some time. On the next autorun section, they have these rails on the ceiling that are very consistent and fast, but you have to be actually pretty precise to land on them. On the final autorun section of this stage, you can do a big slope jump and skip the entirety of this section if you do it right. From here, we give Black Doom the hug he so desperately needed and finish the stage. Sunset Heights Act 2 is one of my personal favorite 2D stages in the entire game. This stage flows incredibly well and has really cool routes and mechanics. This stage is built for speedrunning, as if you don't know what you're doing, it's incredibly slow and can feel like a slog, but when you figure it out, it looks like this. They added some fun details for replays, like this ring hidden in this pit that takes you immediately to the top route. After this, Alpha does a double jump to get a reticle on an enemy on a higher path twice in a row to avoid running back and forth. Immediately after this, there's a few chains of multiple enemies that can take you back up to the top path and advance to the second half of the stage. Down in the sewers like a little rat, Shadow's best friend here is his chaos control. This is because the sewers will open, and if you get hit by the water, you'll end up on the bottom route. After progressing a bit more, there is a section here where you need to immediately send it, since these sewers will almost immediately open up in drenched shadow. From here, hit a quick chaos control chain, and Sunset Heights 2 is done. Now that we've finished the main stages of this section, we need to unlock the boss gate to progress. This is actually one of the more recent discoveries in Shadow Generations, but they found a really nice way to get up here. Normally you have to go through the tower painstakingly slow as you finish challenges, and you have to do this climb both to unlock the challenges and get back up for the fight. Before, runners would skip parts of this, but it was still pretty slow, until they found this. By stomping on a very specific part of this loop, you land on the dash pad, which gives you the dash pad speed plus the loop physics, and you fly into the air. Alpha nails this trick and reaches the boss gate with ease, while also unlocking the next set of challenges. This time, Alpha's going to do all 8 that are unlocked since he will need every key eventually. To save a lot of time platforming up to Sunset Heights challenges, Alpha does a big jump off of the boss tower to reach this spring. From here you can go all the way to the top of this section in no time at all and begin the challenges. Starting off is the Death Egg Robot Challenge, where you need to hit these switches to make the robots clear your path. This one is pretty simple. Hit the switch and platform around the obstacles. That is until the end, where you do a precise spear max, and this will allow you to completely skip the last section. The next challenge isn't too difficult either, being that it's another dash ring challenge. The speedrunning community quickly routed out the exact amount of rings that you need to complete the requirements and still get to the end very quickly. Coming up though are 2 of the hardest challenges in the whole game. The Spinning Spikes challenge can go wrong with the slightest error, and dying in a challenge can be a massive point of time loss, since you have to restart the entire thing. The biggest challenges in the speedrun is avoiding the spikes to hit this red ring and skipping around this spring section. At the end, the gold ring runs away from Shadow, but Alpha knows exactly where it's going, so he spear maxes to its eventual destination and meets it there. The next challenge is even worse in the One Ring Challenge. As the name implies, you only get one ring, and every moment is incredibly dangerous with massive pits and spikes everywhere. This challenge is all about precision and boost management, since another big factor is the limited amount of boost you have since there is only one ring in the entire stage. After the Sunset Heights challenges, Alpha warps to Kingdom Valley to start those off with Ring Collector. This challenge is actually really cool to watch, as it's even more open than the actual Kingdom Valley stage, which allows runners to make it into a spear maxing playground. Most of this challenge is just making a mad dash to the end while grabbing the rings on the way to get the 100 requirement. The big jump off the wind rail is deceptively hard, as this camera can absolutely destroy you here, but Alpha makes it over to the next section and finishes up with the 100 rings. The next challenge involves Doom Surf, and you have to destroy 25 crates with the spin move. Alpha takes this rail and the path on the right to get to the end as fast as possible, since this requirement is incredibly lenient. The Pillars challenge is a deceptively tricky one. It involves the moving pillar scene in Kingdom Valley 2, but there is a bit more to it this time. There are some cool moments where you have opportunities to make tight cycles if you have good platforming. One interesting strat is not completing the QTE correctly here, so that you can immediately boost, and this saves a small bit of time. The most important strat here though comes right at the end. At a certain point of this loop, you can spear max and keep that momentum, and skip this next section where you're waiting for a while. This is incredibly tough to hit as the timing window is extremely tight. The last challenge of this section is another requirement to destroy robots and reach the end. This one is really all about making it to the end since the count here is very lenient. After completing this last mission, there is a very inconsistent strategy that can save a large amount of time. We need to get back up to the boss gate, but going around is quite the process. From here, you can just use this fan to send Shadow up and then spear max forward. If you set this up just right, you can actually homing attack the spring, and Shadow will land just past the spring on the rail instead. And this rail will take you directly to the top of the tower where the boss gate awaits. Metal Overlord is a boss that takes place entirely with the Doom Surf. This boss isn't super complicated in the run, but there are a few things runners do to make it faster. One of the key things is to not actually use these ramps to deal big damage to the boss in phase 1. The reason for this is because the animations take a really long time and you will be better off just hitting all of the rubble at the boss until you actually advance to the next phase. To do this though, that means not missing any possible chance to damage the boss. That includes either damage boosting or carefully weaving around lasers, as well as using this last Chaos Control trail for some big damage at the end. If you had done enough damage to this point of the fight, it will immediately jump into the next phase, skipping the lengthy tail attack section. Phase 2 is a 2D section. This one is a lot more straightforward. You hit any rubble you're able to until this section at the end here. You're intended to Chaos Control and hit this falling debris, leading to this really sick animation and the end of the fight. But if you actually don't use Chaos Control and still hit enough rubble, you can skip that animation entirely, and still end the fight even quicker. After finishing up Metal Overlord, we're on to the next section of the run as we get closer and closer to endgame. Once again, entering the new section, we have to pick up yet another Doom power in the Doom Morph. This ability is rough when you play the game casually. It doesn't give much of a tutorial and it's not really intuitive either. So let's go into a quick tutorial of my own. Doom Morph is actually really fast and very fun once you get its little quirks down. First off, you're probably wondering what happens when you interact with these balls. Well, if you tap homing attack on them, you will just go to the ball and drop. If you hold homing attack, you will swing, but there is even more to it than that. If you let go of the swing right away, it will act like a tap from there, but if you wait until you're directly under the ball, you will rocket out of the top of it. Otherwise, you have to wait until you swing past the middle point to let go and fly forward. Now you're basically caught up, but there is one more thing. Similar to a spin dash jump, speedrunners use what I'm going to call the morph jump. If you channel a dash, it doesn't go off right away. A little animation plays as he channels the dash and then rockets forward. Well, you can actually immediately jump out of this, but you have to time it right, which is much easier said than done. Alright, now you're caught up, and let's see what the game teaches you about Doom Morph. Move fast with RT, okay. Hold X in midair to grab onto a morph ball and jump. That's it? Yeah, so let's just say the Doom Morph itself is cool, and Sonic Team's tutorial is to blame here, because it is not intuitive at all. Moving past this, now is when we'll be completing the other two challenges in Space Colony Ark, since we have to run that way to get to our next stage. So Alpha warps to the stage and enters the challenge. The first challenge is a defeat many enemies challenge, and this one is actually pretty involved. This route has been optimized to only defeat quick enemies and hit the exact amount by the end of the challenge. There is one skip towards the end in the form of a wall run, and then Spear Max launch to avoid a whole section. This skip is risky, but saves a ton of time, and Alpha finishes the challenge from there. The next challenge is another one ring challenge, though this one has something going for it that the others don't. Alpha immediately does platforming to reach a rainbow ring to the top path. The difference in this version of the one ring challenge is that we are given a chaos control, and if you combine that with using capsule glitch, boost management will not be an issue here at all. After completing these challenges, Alpha begins to head to our next stage in the run using both the Doom Surf and Doom Morph on the way to get there. Loading into Chaos Island, this is an incredibly flashy stage. Right away, Alpha uses some morph jumps to get across to the main section, and then takes a bit of a detour for a big launch to make it across a massive gap. As scary as this looks, it's arguably safer than the alternatives. After this, we see some more spear maxing across gaps, and we approach a loop. Speedrunners hate automation, so Alpha is actually just gonna skip the whole thing. Coming up on the mid section of the stage, there's this rail section that is really just meant to be a set piece, but speedrunners won't settle for that. Instead of just riding the rail, Alpha takes matters into his own hands and flies across the gap to just barely reach the next set of rails. While there are some strats to skip this long drawn out part with the volcano, this strat is currently not being done at any percent because it is considered too risky, for now. The next section is underground tunnels seen in Frontiers, and while most of this is just boosting through the tunnels, there are some cool strats like skipping right over platforming and using the Chaos Sphere to go up to the top path. On the volcano ascent, Alpha chooses to stay on the top path with Doom Morph and then immediately use the Chaos control they give you to Doom Blast through the rest of the climb. Here he will intentionally hit the ground to make sure Shadow has an air boost available and then hit this spring. Alpha boosts and jumps to the side so that you can just barely get a homing attack onto this balloon. Once again, Alpha lands and hits the spring so that he can air boost to the rainbow ring and swing to the end of the stage. Act 2 is also a very cool stage that used the Doom Morph quite a lot. Alpha platforms through the early parts of the stage and utilizes Chaos control to stop these rolling balls as they can be hard to deal with. After some more platforming, Alpha comes up on the indoor morph section. He takes the top path here by jumping and hitting the morph ball on the ceiling. This path avoids a ton of platforming and just allows the runner to spam dash. From here we get our first look at these platforms, and Alpha immediately bails, expertly avoiding spikes, and making it all the way across. Here there is another platform they expect you to ride as it slowly descends, but Alpha just jumps right in and boosts forward instead. After damage boosting through some spikes, Alpha ascends out of the underground tunnels to the end of the stage. After completing Chaos Island, this section only has one stage to it, so from here Alpha seeks to immediately unlock the boss gate. Similar to Chaos Island's tunnels, this boss gate isn't high up in a tower, but instead hidden deep underground. Alpha uses a big morph jump to skip tons of Doom Morph platforming and skip all the way to the boss gate from the start of this section. From here we'll see one of my contributions to the run. It shows you the way out of the tunnel and the challenges unlocking. I figured out that if you go into the tunnel, it activates a Doom Morph ball right outside so you can return through the tunnel. So the strat here is to activate the ball, then immediately warp back to Chaos Island and start the challenges. Right away, Alpha begins one of the toughest challenges in the run, Chaos Control Master. This involves using Chaos Control to stop falling platforms and spikes impeding your progress. Alpha navigates these platforms and then hits this red ring. Right at the peak, Alpha spear maxes over to the section just past the spikes. From here, he takes the pulley and does a precise spear max over to the end of the challenge. The Doom Morph challenge is a funny one because Alpha will never actually use the Doom Morph during this segment. Immediately, he veers off the path and stomps on this rock collision. Boosting right as Shadow lands, he gets sent flying into the air. From here, if you land on this platform, you can spear max over to the spring and then go straight to the end. Without ever touching the Doom Morph this challenge was built around. The enemy challenge doesn't have much to it as it's mostly just a mad dash to the end, but the last challenge of the run is arguably one of the most difficult, Gondola Master. This sounds like a relatively simple challenge, but there is a lot going on here. Immediately, Alpha is going to jump and then boost against the right side of the platform. This allows Shadow to get onto the wall and wall run all the way up because of the platform's collision. Right when he reaches the top, he's going to spear max across. This part is important to get good distance, otherwise this happens. After skipping the first section, he does a neutral jump to fly across and then glides along the next gondola section, skipping the entire thing. After climbing, Alpha boosts into the wall and damage boosts off of these spikes, as the dash pads will send him to victory. At this point, the last challenge of the run is complete, and Alpha makes a mad dash for the boss gate after collecting the final key. Using the method I described earlier to return through the tunnel, Alpha enters the mysterious boss fight. Alpha begins to fight whoever this is by immediately mocking him and interrupting his little speech with a boop. During this attack, Alpha does a few mash X attacks before holding X to slam and hit him with the Dragon Ball style move. Because he hit so many times on the first go around, this time Alpha can immediately slam the boss into the ball and finish off the first phase. Into the second phase, Alpha uses Chaos Control to freeze the boss as it goes into the ground, and slams into it. This way you don't have to hit it multiple times in its monster form. Right away, there is yet another Chaos Control strat. If you hit 4 of these clones right away, and then Chaos Control to hit the rest, you can skip a cutscene, saving a good chunk of time just from a small adjustment in the game plan. From here, Shadow has a sick animation destroying this random enemy, and sealing it away for good. Now that we've finished the main portion of the game, we're in the true endgame. And to start that off, we need to get our first and last Doom power once again, the Doom Wings. This ability is by far the most broken in the game, which is why they took it away right after teasing us with it early. From here, it's time for the final showdown with Black Doom in his favorite place. To get there, Alpha begins the climb but quickly turns around to Doom Blast this enemy, straight to the end, and enters the final stage. Radical Highway. When I first recorded for this video, this stage looked very different. It was a lot about optimizing the little moments of the stage with some big skips mixed in, but now it looks entirely different. In early December, one of the biggest skips in the game was discovered. By using some weird physics to go out of bounds, runners are able to set up on top of this building out of bounds. With a precise lineup, you can jump right back into that weird loop physics, and Shadow is sent flying. If you spear max during this motion, you will maintain the speed without losing it at all. You can immediately redirect the speed by boosting and starting another spear max right after. The goal from here is to fly straight to this auto run section on this inverted wall. The version that Alpha goes for here saved nearly 40 seconds over the previous strats, but since then, runners have labbed out an even crazier version. Xanz in the 10240 hits what's known as the God Fling. This version goes almost all the way to the goal ring, and actually saves around a full minute over the old strats that we talked about. From here, the rest of the stage is a total breeze, boosting through a corkscrew to the goal ring. Heading into Act 2, this is the only Act 2 in the game that is actually in 3D, and it has some very unique strats. Because of how broken the Doomwing is, the routing has been built around that the entire time, but speedrunners found that you can actually break out of bounds and perform a massive skip even without the wings. By taking this upper path, you can continue along the way through the stage until this rail, where you can jump to these buildings out of bounds and make a precise spear max to the next portion of the stage, avoiding invisible walls and kill planes in your way. From here, boost management is incredibly important, as there are no rings on this out of bounds section, and you'll still have to make it across to the next bridge section. Once here, cycles are incredibly important as these bridges spin, and if your timing is bad, you won't even be able to run on them. Alpha hits an ideal cycle here and blazes through, collecting rings on the way, and then activates the Doomwing. He skips this rail to immediately start the next section and hits these rings intended to be a backup route. At the end of these triple rails, Alpha flips off of them right before the red rings, and keeps that momentum with the skewed gravity. From here, he's able to make it all the way up to these enemies, and this will allow him to skip a big automated section of the stage. At the next triple rails, Alpha does yet another rail switch, and from here can fly straight to the final stretch of the stage. At this point, all that stands between Alpha and a world record speedrun is the final boss, Devil Doom. As bosses go in this run, they're usually pretty straightforward, and this one isn't too much different, but there are many different phases. To start, the first phase includes the Doom Surf, similar to the Metal Overlord fight. The goal here is to get as much chip damage as possible, but this time we also want those big damage moments, as waiting delays the fight a lot more this time. Alpha gets ideal damage and finishes this phase exactly where expected, and starts the Doom Morph phase. Here, Alpha needs 3 hits, and the biggest problem is quickly platforming all the way to the front and hitting this spring. This section involves a lot of morph jumps and just trying to get in the right position. Every hit that happens, the farther Shadow is sent back, but Alpha has a game plan for all 3 hits. After the 3rd hit, Devil Doom is defeated, but there is one more final phase. This is Neo Devil Doom. This fight will take place entirely with the Doomwing. The objective here is to survive Doom's onslaught of attacks, and get to a phase where you can actually damage it. Doom sends out an attack that you can hit back. Alpha sets up on the very side of the area and spams spin over and over, until this attack is done and gets a big hit off. Rinse and repeat for 2 more cycles, and Doom has had enough. He's going to give Shadow a taste of his own medicine with Chaos Control, but Shadow fights back with his own as he prepares to finish off Black Doom for good. With one last QTE to go, Alpha mashes X to finish off the run, and Shadow Generation's any percent is complete with a 105 flat. And that's the run. As you've now seen, the speedrun community has come up with some incredible tricks and routes to blaze through all of Shadow Generations. Special shout out to the Alpha and Xanz for allowing me to use their runs for this video. Make sure to check out their links in the description for Sonic speedruns and the continued grind for that coveted sub hour. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Make sure to sub for more Sonic speedrun content, and I'll see you next time.